You know, some days, you just gotta get up. You gotta get up in the morning and take inventory of yourself and realize, I can't be sitting here playing video games every day. I gotta be a man. I gotta be a bigger man. I gotta make a slightly more complicated show about playing video games. So that's it. That's right, guys. Thanks for being here for this year of Game Grumps.
Right before the end of Season 1 of JonTron, Game Grumps had taken off at max power and became a massive hit. The initial run of Game Grumps would end in June of 2013, with John moving east to New York City and making JonTron Season 2 a priority. When John was with Game Grumps, the episodes were far and few between, but his work on Game Grumps is unprecedented. Even though JonTron was on the road to being as popular as he is now, Game Grumps gave him a massive boost in popularity. Game Grumps also worked as an exercise for him, honing more skill for his comedic character. Even though there's a massive 8-month gap between videos, hence why people break these videos up into seasons, this was for the best. John had to adjust to his environment and get himself situated, but this new setting and influences would bring upon some of the best work created by John. I think that JonTron Season 2 is one of the most consistently good streaks of content from YouTube at the time. The intros are sprite pixel animated, the camera work feels more defined, and everything about the season feels so much different. JonTron upgraded his presentation to something that really wasn't seen at the time, especially for this genre. Most video game reviewers from this time heavily borrowed from AVGN's streamlined approach, keeping things simple in the camera and editing work. I think that JonTron changed the game with his production here, but it still had that homegrown feel. Before I get into the actual review, I want to talk about JonTron's time at Game Grumps compared to what it is now and my nostalgia for when it debuted. I was really stoked when Game Grumps was announced. At the time, these were two of my favorite YouTube gaming personalities, and they come together to form this Let's Play channel. This seems like a dream for me. Getting an off-the-hook and candid collaboration between Aaron and John almost twice a day was so amazing, and it definitely delivered at the time as well. As much as I don't care for Game Grumps now, I'm extremely fond of the first 2 or 3 years of the project, more so Aaron and John. Their Goof Troop and Sonic the Hedgehog videos are legendary and respectfully command a full watch. I've probably watched every John and Aaron episode of Game Grumps. I was that invested. The synergy between John and Aaron was unprecedented at the time. Even if it was just giggling about something stupid, it was really contagious and you couldn't help but laugh along.
What the fuck is...
Oh my fucking god.
Are they just fucking like...
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Oh my god, he exploded! Okay.
Now, when John left Game Grumps, I was really disappointed. It was only a year that he was around, and I was hoping it would be many more years. But that was until I saw who would be replacing him. Now, I've completely grown out of taste with Ninja Sex Party, but I still like their first 2 albums and videos that accompany them. While they're mostly known for their comedy, I really like the albums due to their influence from Ben Folds for the instrumentals. At the time, I was hooked on Ninja Sex Party. I wasn't worried about Danny taking the helm, unlike most people. The doubt that people had about Danny soon faded away with the elusive Punch-Out series. My taste has changed as I've gotten older, but I really can't sit and watch newer Let's Plays anymore. Once in a while I'll tune into a new Game Grumps episode, but I'm mostly a fan of Oni Plays due to how candid and absurdist it is. In fact, Oni Plays, to me at least, is very reminiscent of the early days of Game Grumps. But nonetheless, JonTron and Aaron's run on Game Grumps almost commands its own video, and we'll see about it. Hands down, this is my favorite episode and video ever put out by JonTron, for numerous reasons. It is a great comeback after a long wait, but it toppled any expectations I had at the time. Honestly, it's one of those things you needed to be there for. I remember the moment I saw this in my feed and being extremely excited. What awaited me is something I'd never forget. I constantly played this episode 1 to 3 times a week until the next episode came out. I think this is because he doesn't linger on one game. I think the writing and comedy here are top notch. I think this is where he peaked, honestly. One of the reasons that this video works really well is because it doesn't linger on one game. I know he's done this format in the past, but I think this is where he perfected it. Each game he goes over has a refreshing set of comedic opportunities, and it keeps us engaged as an audience. Reviewers from this time seem to have their writing focus on one thing usually, and they rely too much on running gags or constant complaining, which doesn't really age well, especially when we metatextually analyze it. John really plays to his strengths in this episode by shifting into new territory, while keeping a consistent theme of HERCULES games. One criticism I have is how fast we go from game to game. I'm not John and I don't know how far he wants to go with the joke, but this is just a nitpick. I know John is comedic, but he is pretty good at showing off the games. I guess I really just wanted to see what else was on the Hercules Commodore game. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think tons of creators were inspired by this specific type of video. Ones in which they go through a themed list or entire series. And I know it's either AVGN or JonTron that helped elevate it, not create it. And also, feel free to discuss whether that's true or not. I just have so much nostalgia for this episode. To this day, I'm still enamored by the video. I can't watch it without having a grin on my face for the entire runtime. I think it's that good.
Oh, my stomach.
Dude, you gonna be alright?
Dude, shut up.
In the first season of JonTron, when he tackled other media, I found it kind of hard to like it as much as his video game related content. Luckily, JonTron made a quick U-turn and did a really good two-parter on Goosebumps. This is one of the most memorable episodes, mostly for how John works with the absurdity of what he's commentating in a fast-paced way. Each gag works in succession and it doesn't let up. The 3 episodes he chose to showcase really work synergistically with the gags. This is mostly because he goes through the bad episodes of Goosebumps, but also because he seems to be comedically invested. There are a few more skits that add a special touch to this episode, and he really decided to make it his own here. I'm glad that John finally got his pacing right with a media form that he wasn't really comfortable with yet. But, you know, that's just my opinion. We jump immediately from a Halloween special to a Christmas special. Except that it kind of skipped entirely over Christmas into February because John is a lazy sack of shit. John keeps the format of showing off multiple games with making this one specifically about Home Alone games. It even features the real-life Macaulay Culkin true to form. I really like the setup for this episode, where JonTron has to find some redeemable game in the series to revive Jacques. This narrative piece really gives weight to the humor and sets a structure, something we usually don't see. The one thing that does suck is the cop-out ending. The joke is that the Sega versions of the games were the good ones, but he really didn't talk about them too much. I know John cares more about making good jokes rather than weaving a narrative, which probably explains this ending.
I found it! Macaulay, wake up! Come on, wake up, come on. Get out that stove corn. Shit, I hallucinated all that, didn't I?
Seriously, it ends after that. No end slate at all. Like, nothing. John just ended it on that. Just for that joke. Beautiful. About a 5 out of 10. Releasing just 2 days after the Home Alone games videos, we get this classic gem. This is probably my second or third favorite episode in the season. It's just one of those episodes where the gags just continually work. Most reviewers choose bad games for comedy, but John goes above and beyond and finds stupid bootleg games, which this season seems to really gravitate towards. I feel like John just went to a flea market and based his content on what he could find there, which is what all of New York is, coincidentally. Speaking of New York, what the hell is John wearing? John's channeling his inner Roman Bellic here. Just disgusting. He wears this later as well. I hate it. There's a ton of stuff going on in this episode, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. I've mentioned this before in the last season review, but you can tell that JonTron loses his structure and just throws shit at the wall. This is one of those episodes that feels like a smorgasbord, a cacophony of madness, if you will. And really, I don't think I'd have it any other way, but only when it works, and there is an episode later in the season that doesn't work, but this is still one of the best. John is the first one to review this movie. After this review, everyone would jump on the bandwagon. Don't let anyone tell you any different. Listen to Garfield, you aren't immune to propaganda. Speaking of propaganda, this movie is just neoliberalism personified. Maybe even worse than Ready Player One. And that movie was at least halfway decent. And really, that is how I feel about this review. While it is good in some areas, I mostly forget about this until now. I think my favorite thing about this video is the meta-narrative spliced in about starting dumb framing devices in online video reviews, obviously taking a crack at people like AVGN and Nostalgia Critic. I'm fond of the satire because it was a tired trope even when this video came out. I think that puts this video a peg above just for that. It's part of what made JonTron so great and invigorating at the time. It was no bullshit, all laughs, all around good content. Didn't need character building or anything extra. Earlier I said that this season is full of bootlegs and oddities. Well, this episode is just a bootleg of the Hercules one. I know that's a hot take, but I seriously forgot about this episode until I was writing this review. John just took the concept for Hercules games and just applied it to another big muscly man. That's all he did. He's also wearing that stupid Adidas jacket again, so that already points down for me. I don't even remember half the stuff in this video, it just feels forgettable. This episode is only worth half a watch, and I was kind of bored throughout. This is that episode that feels like a smorgasbord where things just got thrown at a wall and just kind of spliced together, but it just kind of doesn't work here, and I really don't enjoy it.
There's a jar of horseradish up there. I don't know what it is. This is scary.
Okay, so we were filming in Paul's basement in Philadelphia, and there was literally just this jar of green horseradish on the pipe, and I said, "Paul, what's that?" And he's like, "I don't know. It came with the house." And I'm pretty sure whatever it is poisonous. So it really was scary, more or less.
While the last one was boring, this one totally makes up for it. This review is 2 years in the making, according to John.
Hey, you want to know how hard this game is? I started this review in 2012.
John takes on one of the most infamous games ever created. What is perplexing about this episode is that the jokes write themselves and John knows it. He allows the absurdity of it all to take control and fly off. This little snippet here just explains everything you need to know about this episode.
You know, whenever I find myself in this situation, I find that pay alimony works out far smoother in the long run, but there is no denying that a punch is a much more satisfying short-term solution. Also, I'd just like to point out that there is a licensed Nintendo game with domestic violence in it!
People really love this episode, and I can see why. I also think that it's one of the only episodes where John actually goes through a game entirely and explains how it works. This is probably because the entire game is a joke within itself, so he kinda had to. A good one in the season. Can't find much fault in it. This episode has the grommet joke. Alright. This episode is my personal second favorite episode. Not only is this episode entertaining for what he's reviewing, but how he commentates it, and how the in-between skits work with it, especially the end. I also appreciate the callback to California with certain references. Kinda gives me the vibe that John is homesick. Also, I've come to find myself really liking the New York room better than all of the other places he's filmed his videos. It's simple and familiar and doesn't make me shudder like the new set. I really don't have much to add to this part of the review, other than it created a ton of memes from the JonTron subreddit, and it's fondly remembered for a good reason. TITENIC is probably one of the most obscure, if not totally obscure things he's ever done a video on. Come to think of it, it seems that a majority of this season is talking about obscure games and bootlegs. As for this video, he covers 2 Titanic-based games, which isn't as obscure as John says. Just ask our neighborhood Titanic expert for a full list of virtual interactive experiences based on Titanic. This episode created a ton of classic gags and really gave him incentive to do more with the format. People even made a goofy song out of it. And I have to say, this episode has some of the most memorable visual gags. I applaud him for going a little extra here. Honestly, this is just a classic in my book, and it seems to be fondly remembered. Fun fact, TITENIC was speedrunned at Games Done Quick this year. Not sure if this was because of JonTron's influence, but I think it's safe to assume that it's because of the view counts on both videos regarding this game.
Because of Jack's painting skills and his courage attracted Rose very much, and she loves him deeply.
Anti-Drug Games probably has the highest usable reaction images and GIFs. To this day, this is one of the most rewatchable episodes of JonTron. The focus of the episode makes for great comedic payoff, and I love the subtlety and little details that make this episode great. Firstly, the opening to this episode foreshadows the future drug PSAs episode. There is also a callback to the Nightshade episode, with a hint of satire on John's most quoted jokes.
Also, looks like they had a Nightshade competition in this issue. Why'd no one tell me? I ain't gonna take that sitting down.
There also seems to be an underlying commentary on the war on drugs as well, which is a nice touch. Any jabs at Ronald Reagan is a good thing in my book, really. Overall, this is a favorite among most of John's fans, for a good reason. I think without this, we wouldn't have the drug PSAs video. I can't forget to mention that this is probably my favorite ending to a JonTron episode ever.
Didn't. Calling the kettle black if I ever thought of saying I misrepresented myself. Away from me. You're a coward and a liar and a thief.
That guy went to the moon.
Overall, I think this is one of the best in the season, although not my personal favorite. Fun fact, this video came out on my 18th birthday. I really didn't know how to open this segment. This episode is still really weird to me, because I've known this game way before this video came out. I am still at awe at the fact that, of all people, JonTron reviews this obscure gem. I have to say though, looking back, this is one of the weirdest episodes of JonTron, and I don't think it's as memorable. The best part about it is the ending gag with Scissorman. Personally, I think this is one of the weakest episodes in the season, if not the weakest, besides the Conan the Barbarian episode. I feel it's more a montage of jokes that jump around, and it doesn't feel consistent with the tone of the game. The game itself is pretty revolutionary for the time, bringing a very believable atmosphere for a Super Nintendo game. Trying to be comedic with this game seems to be hard, but I'm glad John picked an obscure gem rather than some weird bad game for this Halloween special. It just turned out that trying to make jokes out of a good game is harder than a bad game.
I got a bone to pick with you!
So, Goosebumps was the Halloween special for 2013, so it was only appropriate he would do Are You Afraid of My Ass? Shit, I couldn't even do that without smiling. Does it even stack up to the Goosebumps episode? Besides the intro sequence and these lovely credits, I'd say that this actually ranks way below it. I honestly don't care for this episode. Some of the jokes fall flat, and some of the reactions just get tired after a while. I think this is the only actual joke I like in this episode.
All right, come on, this isn't scary at all. I mean, how many times is he gonna dick around in the basement before something actually happens?
It's not a bad episode by any means, it just feels that it's lazier than the last Halloween special. Just as lazy as me not writing anything else about this episode, so, you know, whatever, fuck off. If this season is gonna have a comfy episode, it's Japanese shoot-'em-ups. This episode isn't anything too amazing, but it isn't trying to be. It just feels comfy. Comfy. I feel this is the game sack of JonTron episodes. He takes us through a nice set of games within the genre. Also, if you don't know who GameSack is, just get off my channel. Go. The one thing about this episode that sticks out to me is just how far they went with making the fake box arts for the jokes.
Ah, the memories with this one. I still have nightmares.
Some of the jokes feel casually delivered and it doesn't make me laugh, but because the atmosphere of the episode is chill, I'll let it pass. I think one of the things that makes this episode quote-unquote comfy is that John is just really going over some good Japanese shoot-'em-up games. Except for this one. Ugh. I like that he chose to make an episode out of games that aren't bad just to only make it comedic, but to show something off. Good on him for that. I went out and found Harmful Park and played that quite a bit after this episode, so I actually took something away from this episode. Now, this episode is extremely good, but I realize that the title is false advertising. I think he realized that the majority of the season was him just doing bootleg games, so he couldn't put that in the title. He only talks about the plug-and-play consoles that were popular in actual stores by Jack Specific for like 2 or 3 minutes. I'm not complaining, but this is definitely John knowing that he's pulling the same shit. Most of the episode is just trying to find a somewhat good game in all of these bootleg consoles, and the comedy here is pretty great. I have a connection with this episode because I actually used to have a lot of these plug-and-play consoles myself. I used to collect a bunch of these a while back because of how stupid they were. I'm stunned that somebody hasn't done a large-scale series about these little things. I'd actually like to see some type of serious documentary behind this quote-unquote industry, unless all the people behind it are dead. It seems that a lot of people really like this episode, and, I can't disagree. Especially this guy who made a bracket where this episode won. This bracket was made in 1889, apparently. For this Christmas special, John brings Christ back into Christmas by playing a game that would have made Christ voluntarily put himself on the cross. This is one of those episodes where John lets the absurdity of the game completely take the wheel. I mean, look at this. John went to the depths of the internet, or, hell, to find this horrible Christian PC game. Like, this is comedy written for you. You just need to react absurdly. And you know what? Really, there's no other way he could have ended this season. It's just a mismatch of absurdity, and it's really rewatchable. JonTron Season 2 is some of the best gaming content to ever exist on YouTube. There are so many great moments that defined his career, and honestly, I don't believe we'll ever see a level of excellence from him again. I honestly believe that the series of videos went on to help inspire this type of video on YouTube, and I hope this video helps cement JonTron Season 2's legacy in the long run. Thank you everyone for watching, some of you for the second time, but I appreciate the support. I think it would be appropriate for me to review Starcade, but I'm not sure exactly when this will be. Well, whenever it is, I'll see you then.